What can you do when there seems there is nothing you can do? This is a question we all face. I am going to say more people struggle with this question more than any other question. This is a question that is probably asked the most in sports too, and probably more people ask this question in baseball. I believe more rare things happen in baseball, and how you handle it makes the difference in the game. You can do everything right, but that doesn't mean you aren't going to face adversity. Playing a sport is all about facing adversity, and the team that handles it best usually is the more successful team. Wouldn't you agree with me? Playing a sport is a lot like living life. What do you do when life just throws you a curveball? Maybe the girl you were sure you were going to marry decides she isn't into you anymore, so she decides it is time to break up. Maybe a friend comes down with an illness and nothing can be done. Maybe a parent dies too soon. Maybe you don't get an opportunity to do the job you believe you should get. Maybe the Cubs get swept out of the playoffs. The reality is we are going to have adversity happen in life, so the question is, what do you do when there seems like there is nothing you can do? We are at Hope College, so we know the popular answer is to say we'll give everything over to God. However, when circumstances like these arise, God is usually the last resort. Many of us decide to give up on God because we don't understand how a loving God can allow these things to happen in our lives. We can't wrap our minds around that, so we turn to other things. We turn to things that might help the pain, like drinking, partying, or just denying the adversity, but in the end won't make it go away. I have struggled with this question for about 35 of my 42 years. And really there are still days where I still wake up and wonder why. In 1973, my family was expecting their 5th child. Mom expected this to go like any other of her pregnancies, and it was seemingly going as planned. When the morning came, she was so relaxed, she cleaned the house up. She went to the hair salon to get her hair done. She made dinner for my family, and after doing that finally decided to call my dad. When they arrived at the hospital, my dad kissed her as she was taken to the delivery room. Over the next 2 hours, their lives were going to change dramatically. The umbilical cord was coming out before me, so it was cutting off my supply of oxygen. The doctors decided to do an emergency C-section. I was without oxygen for 45 minutes. I wasn't breathing and was given CPR for another 40 minutes. I was finally breathing on my own, but I was without oxygen for at least 90 minutes, if not longer. A week later, when my parents took their son home, they thanked the doctor. The doctor told them they may not want to thank him. The lack of oxygen to my brain caused an injury to the motor cortex of it. I have a disability called cerebral palsy. I am classified as an athletoid, which means my muscles never stop moving. My life wasn't going to be the life I expected for me. I wasn't going to be able to walk or talk. I wasn't going to be the star athlete like I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be able to do a lot of things, and all of a sudden I had to decide how I wanted to live life. I realized I was different and I couldn't do a lot of the things my friends could do, but my family made the effort to include me in everything they did. Mom even made sure I was dressed dressed in the right style, and even though I wore shoes for about 30 minutes a day, I always had the newest Michael Jordan shoes. I didn't start to question Mom until I realized even though I had everything, I was still the kid with the disability. I was always going to be sitting on the sidelines. I had been going to church my whole life, and I had been hearing about this God who loved me more than anything. However, something didn't make sense. If God really loved me, he would make me better. I kept asking Mom, why doesn't God make me better? Why do I have to have a disability when my brothers and sisters can run and play? I want to be just like them. I want to play sports. I want to be an athlete, but this God we talk about leaves me in this condition. I would be so frustrated sitting on the side watching my brothers and friends play. I would cry, but every day Mom would tell me, remember Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Every day I heard the same verse, but it didn't really comfort me. It didn't comfort me because as a child growing up I didn't want to hear what God was saying to me. We are going to dive deeper in a moment here, but what Mom was giving me wasn't a verse to be comforted by, but a verse to live the rest of my life. Paul is one of my favorite writers in all of Scripture. He understands what we are going through because he has faced struggles, but unlike us, he doesn't have a problem having an all-powerful God while he is still facing struggles. If you read through all of Paul's letters, this is one of his major themes. I want to give you a little history of where Paul is writing the letter to the Philippians. He is writing this letter to his friends in Philippi while he is sitting in jail in Rome. Paul sitting and waiting are two things that rarely happened. When Paul encounters Jesus, a conversion happens, and he becomes one of the greatest missionaries. He is always on the move. He is always ministering to people. He loves to be busy. However, Paul is writing this sitting in jail. He has to be going crazy, and on top of that he knows Nero is probably going to kill him. Paul is facing adversity, and it would be easy for him to denounce God so he could go home, but he doesn't do that. This is what is so amazing about Paul. He is faithful even when the walls are crumbling down around him. He is content in his situation. Where does he find his contentment? He finds it in Christ. This is where he gives us a life verse in verse 13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Paul is telling us contentment in every circumstance comes from Jesus because he is living in us. Jesus may not take the circumstance away, but he is there walking with us because he is inside of us. I know that is difficult to wrap your mind around, but it's true. We have a God that is bigger than this whole universe, but he has chosen to make his dwelling inside of us. Therefore, he gives us his strength to face adversity. Just think about that for a second. Isn't that amazing? I have no idea where you are in your Jesus walk. I understand the world tells you there are other ways to handle adversity. However, Jesus is the only way we can handle adversity because he will give you his strength to face any circumstance. It took me 23 years to understand what Philippians 4:13 really meant. It didn't mean God was going to take my adversity away so I could do everything I wanted to do. It meant I could handle any adversity because Jesus is going to give me his strength. This changed how I viewed life. I understood now I could handle my disability even when everything seems unfair. Like you, I had to decide what direction to go. I could have said God has given me a raw deal, so I am going to walk away. But I decided in Jesus I can do this, and even though I know I am going to struggle through life, I know I can make it because Jesus will give me his strength. My circumstances haven't changed, and I know there are many struggles ahead of me. However, Philippians 4:13 tells us I can do all this through him who gives me his strength.
We'll take a few questions.